I've been playing a lot of Rainbow Six Extraction over the last week. I think I'm up to over a single day. Yeah, one day, 15 hours and 4 minutes because it can't display the day properly. So, I'm not an expert. I don't have the platinum yet, though I do intend on playing a lot more. And once my friends have actually caught up with me, being able to do more of the later missions. But I have used every operator a significant amount. Like, apart from this guy, he's only 4, but we'll get to him. And I thought, you know what? Why not make a little tier list of who's good, who's bad, and what they're useful for? Because there's a lot of people going to be playing it with the buddy pass and the free trial, and they might be interested in what I have to say. So that's what I'm going to do. Doc is pretty aptly named, as he's a D tier operator. That's D as in bad. Okay, so no one's really that bad, but he just kind of feels outclassed in that his ability isn't particularly useful. Like, it will get better as I level him up more to be able to use it to be able to, give people a little bit more health and have a little bit more ammo. But it just feels ineffective. Being able to revive yourself is kind of the main thing you can do with it. You can also use it to instantly revive other people who've been downed at a decent range, which isn't terrible. It's just that there's also Finka, who can also do it at any range instantly across the map and has a cooldown instead of ammunition for it. Like, Finka is just better. His actual weapons are okay. He's got a shotgun, he's got the MP. Once he gets the HK417, he'll be a bit stronger, in my opinion, because it's one of my favourite guns in the game. But yeah, his abilities are just not great. And the whole thing is stronger recovery. He revives himself with more health. He's okay for beginners for being able to revive themselves when they get downed, but most of the time, if you're reviving yourself when you get down, you're probably going to go down again pretty quickly because you're in a bad spot. I just don't like him very much. Ella's a solid A tier operator. Her abilities are great, and her weapon selection is also good. Having her sticky mines that she can literally just chuck anywhere, they'll stick to walls, ceilings, and floors, and almost instantly detonate and stun enemies in a huge radius, is really strong. Like, even before you get her to top level, just having a stun duration of 10 seconds and a regular cooldown because your mines recharge over time is really strong. And she's got pretty decent weapons. Like, getting access to a couple of assault rifles and an LMG is really strong. So, yeah, Ayla's real good. I like her a lot. A tier. Pulse is a B tier. He's solid, dependable, he does the job. His ability is perfectly fine. Like, the cardiac sensor can detect quite a few things, and as you level it up, it will spot nests for the entire team through walls for a few seconds, which isn't bad. But again, that kind of feels like the sort of thing that it's done better by stuff like the recon drones. Like, getting up so you get the passive sensor and automatic detect nests near you, that's pretty handy. His stats are pretty decent. He's got decent armor and decent speed once you get him up, and his weapon selection is fine. Like, his shotgun that starts with, it's not the best, but the UMP is pretty good, and the 5.56 looks pretty solid as well. He's fine. He's perfectly average. He does the job. I'd put Alibaba as an A tier operator. Her ability with the throwing decoys that attract enemies is really good. Like, it'll distract enemies for quite a significant length of time, which is handy for practically any objective, but especially so for objectives where you have to hold the line in a stationary area. Like, the number of times that saved me from being blown up by breachers, I can count on, well, I need more than two hands. So her drone decoys are really good, and getting up to the top level means they'll start to recharge will be even more useful. Her weapon selection is okay. Like, the 12 gauge shotgun, not a big fan of that, but getting access to an LMG later and having a decent SMG is pretty good. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is her secondaries. Like, they're just not the best, but having a shotgun that's a secondary is pretty handy for sludges, if nothing else. So yeah, Alvazi, like, her ability is real strong. Being able to distract large numbers of enemies, scan them for the bonus points, tell your team where they are, it's pretty good. Finka is an S tier operator for sure. Finka is fantastic. Her ability will revive people and stop them from going down again for 10 seconds. So you can use it reactively to be able to pick people up when they get knocked down, or you can use it proactively to be able to stop them from going down in the first place. Cooldown gets a bit better as you go along, gives a bit more health to keep them going, but it's easily one of the most powerful abilities in the whole game. Her spear standard weapon is really good. Like it's very accurate at range and good at putting things down. Her stats are pretty decent as well, but it's her ability. Like instant revives, any range away from your team, you really cannot put a price on that. Especially when you're playing with random people, like I spend most of my time doing, because you end up having to revive people a lot. Habaner I'd put as being an A tier. Her weapon selection is pretty solid, like the Type 89 is a real good rifle, and her ability of having a grenade launcher that you can manually detonate that ignores enemy armor is real good. Like, it'll be really nice once I get it up to the maximum level and it starts to recharge. But even at the moment, just having 3 rounds to it, being able to damage proteins and apexes and smashers through any armor they've got, that's real strong. Being able to just say nah and put down a worker instantly, that's real good. Like her ability is very, very strong. The only problem with it is the ammo count, but as I say, once I get her to 10, that will be less of an issue. But it's very, very powerful. Her high speed means she's got a lot of mobility for getting in and out for objectives. Her armor is weak, is the only thing. Like, if her armor is better and she had a better ammo capacity from the start, I'd say she'd be an S class, but as is, she's an A. Lion is an S class, and probably an argument to be made for one of the best operators in the entire game, especially when you're playing with puppies. Having the ability to have everyone on the team have a motion sensor that detects moving enemies in a huge radius around them on a cooldown. I mean, you really you can't put a price on that. That's just so good. And once it gets up to the maximum level, which I've almost got them to, detected enemies become scanned, so they keep tracking even after the ability goes off for a long time. That's also really good. Like Lion is particularly useful for taking on proteins because there's a surge of enemies at the end of the fight. So being able to detect all enemies charging your position in an incredibly dark room for the entire team, yeah, that's real good. His starting weapon is amongst my favorite in the game, the V308. It's a large capacity, fast reloads, excellent fire rate, and it does significant enough damage to be able to put most things down with a couple of rounds. Like it's just a solid rifle all round. His secondaries are fine; they're perfectly good. But yeah, that ability, man, being able to just tell where people are. Like recon is an incredibly important part of extraction. So being able to tell people who aren't near you where things are near them, it's real good. Real good. I'd say Sledge is a B tier. He's useful in some situations. He's not really useful for all of them. Having a big melee weapon is nice for ammo conservation. Once it gets leveled up and you can charge it, you can stun some bigger guys with the attacks, which is pretty useful. I mean, it's a hammer, you can hit things and they go down. But melee is really, really dangerous in this game because things that are going to hit you in melee are going to hit you for half your health. So that's the only reason why I can't really recommend him any better than a B, is just because melee's dangerous. Like his weapon selection is fine, his shotgun does a lot of damage and is nice, but yeah, melee is just too risky to really recommend him as anything better than a B. I'd put Vigil on an A tier. His ability is very strong. His stats are pretty good. He's got a decent amount of speed. His weapons are pretty strong. Being able to become invisible to enemies is remarkably useful. I haven't had the chance to use him against a protein yet to see if the scan will affect that and make him invisible to that. If anyone knows, feel free to drop a comment for the other people who will watch this. But being able to get yourself out of trouble or sneak up on things makes them useful in almost all situations, especially for stuff like biopsies, where being able to reliably make yourself invisible for a takedown, you don't have to worry about carrying your grenades, stuff like that. His weapon selection is pretty good. His K1A is real strong, and unlocking a DMR is also pretty good. But yeah, he's a perfectly good operator with a strong ability. I feel sorry for IQ. Her ability's really not that useful to start with, and it takes a while to level her up to get to the point where it actually does become useful. Being able to detect reactor equipment and mission objectives through walls isn't bad, but I mean, you're only ever going to need to detect like three mission objectives per mission. What you need to detect is bad guys. And when you level her up, her ability does get improvement to be able to detect cloaked enemies and stuff, and it'll be more useful then. But otherwise, she's just a B. Like, I'm not a big fan of her AUG either. Like, her weapon selections could be better. She's got a nice LMG to unlock at the end, but the AUG seems to have a very long reload time for how many bullets you can carry in it. And her ability is just not that great to start with, so she's a B. I'd say Jaeger's a B tier as well. Like, his ability is decently strong and becomes more useful as it gets to a higher level and deals more damage. But being able to put turrets down, it's useful for some mission types, like defensive points, the CEO scan objectives and stuff. That's not bad. Like, the fact that it intercepts projectiles is very Actually, shooting bad guys is probably the more useful part of it for me because I'm generally bad at shooting bad guys. But it's just one of those things. If there's not really that many objectives, we need to hold a zone. And if you do, well, probably there's people with better powers for that. Like Ella with her stun mines is probably more useful than automated turrets, especially since you only get to carry two of them to start with. I think you might only actually get two the entire time. Yeah, you get two turrets, and they have a decent amount of rounds to them when you level up. His weapons are fine. He's got some carbines. They do the job. But yeah, he's okay. He's a B. As you can see, Rook is the first guy I got to 10 because I took him through a Maelstrom protocol to gold. I would put Rook down as being an S class. His ability is very, very strong for one specific reason. Anyone wearing armor falls to down instead of knockout. If you can keep Rook fed with ability recharges, he can keep everyone in the team from getting knocked out for extremely long engagements. Like his armor plates are better than the ones that people can bring along. Once you get into max level, they're given 40% damage resistance, which is better than the 20 that people can bring in their own slot. It frees up react tech slots for other people to be able to bring more useful things than having to bring body armor for themselves. And then being able to keep people standing, it's just all round fantastic. And even just small things like giving a VIP a trauma plate, I think is one of his first things. Yeah, he and VIPs have an armor plate applied by default. It's very strong, and his marksman rifle that he gets later on is also real good. He's just an excellent operator, and there's not a single situation that you couldn't do with bringing along a rook, because taking less damage is good because you're always going to be taking damage. I think Fuse might be the worst character in the game. I would describe him as an F class, and possibly the only F class, because he's just terrible. I really cannot think of a particularly good use case for his ability. His ability is that he can put charges on breakable walls and fire some grenades through to the other side, which in the preview they show there's a whole bunch of stationary people through a breakable wall, and then you can grenade them through that wall. Or, since you can already see them through a breakable wall, you could just shoot them, which would be a lot quicker and doesn't rely on you having a long setup time and hoping that nothing on the other side moves or detects you. I just wish that his bombs were more useful for anything. Literally anything. Like carrying more explosives. Like he needs that movement speed upgrade when he gets to a higher level because having a speed of 1, he trudges around so slowly. His guns are okay, but they're just his ability is so bad. I really have not been in a situation where I thought to myself, you know what, if I had a fuse right now. So yeah, in my opinion, the worst operator in the game. Smoke's alright. Smoke is perfectly good. He's a B class. Like his grenades are kind of similar to Ella's, except instead of stunning people, he does damage to them. So not quite as good as Ella's ability, because stunning things and stopping them from reaching you means you have time to shoot them. But it's kind of nice as a fire and forget thing. Like you can just chuck one at a door, and anything that gets through there will be either dead or gravely injured and able to be taken out with a couple of rounds. That's not bad. It's useful. You know, he's got decent stats. He's got decent weapons. Like his gas mines do a significant amount of damage, and as you level them up, they do a lot more. It's just that it's fine. It's useful, but I prefer stunning to killing just because of the fact that you can guarantee that you've killed them afterwards. Like throwing a stun grenade, throwing a gas grenade at a door and getting some ticks of damage only to find it was a smasher that doesn't care about it. It's going to leave you having a bad time. But yeah, Smoke's fine. He's alright. I didn't expect that I'd like Tachanka much, but I'd say he's a solid B tier operator as well. Like Tachanka, his ability of being able to put a turret down isn't particularly useful. Like it's got the same kind of problem of a lot of our things of like it's got a long setup time, and in most situations you could probably just shoot instead of setting up an out LNG. But it is really good for point defense. Like being able to lay down a large amount of suppressing fire that does a ton of damage is really good for the defense operations like sabotage and the serial scan stuff. But other than that, Tachanka's just a good shooter. Like he has good weapons. He's got the 9x19, which does a lot of decent damage at close range. He's got the semi-auto shotgun. He's got a decent pistol. But his skills include stuff like having faster reload speed and weapon swap speed. Like he's just good at shooting things, and he gets decent speed and the best armor in the game. So it makes him perfectly fine to use. His ability could be better, could have a faster like setup time and stuff like that, but it's useful for point defense. I'd say Cap is a solid A because his weapons are pretty decent. Like he's got access to M249 is always fun, and he'll later on get the M12. His ability is a crossbow, which when you first start off has a long reload time, but gets improved with literally his first improvement. The venom bolts pretty much do the same thing that Smoke's gas grenades do, in that they do significant damage over time, except he's also got the option of swapping over to have smoke bolts instead, which are really strong. Having ready access to smoke grenades essentially is really useful for any class. Being able to use them for both getting takedowns or just giving you some cover from enemy suppression fire, it's pretty decent. Like between having good weapons, having a good useful pair of abilities, and once he's leveled up, at least he gets some armor to actually make up for the fact that he's made of paper to start with. Cap's fine. He's a good A. Like he's reliably useful for almost any objective because that crossbow is good for multiple things. I'd put Gridlock up there with an S class as being one of the better operators in the game because her abilities for track stingers are ludicrous. Like even when you start off, just the radius of those things is absolutely huge. They don't do a lot of damage to start with, but when you get her to 10, they explode when destroyed, and you can carry 5 of them. And they'll literally kill a smasher with explosions while leaving at least two-thirds of them on the ground for more things to get murdered by them. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you can definitely make a fantastic point defense build with Gridlock and bring along some claymores, and you'll have a great time. And she even has fantastic armor and great speed, and she's got good guns. Like the F90 is a really good assault rifle, and she gets an LMG as well. Like Gridlock is fantastic. Lastly, we've got Nomad, who I would also put as an S class. Nomad's ability of an air jab launcher is pretty okay to start with. Like, you might not realize it, but being able to reliably put down a stun grenade that knocks people around and can also set up takedowns for you is pretty good to start with. But once you get her to 7, her mines obliterate pretty much the entire bottom half of the enemy tree. Like anything from a low to a medium level bad guy gets wiped out, and you can carry 6 of those shots. Like I'm trying to play her as much as I can to get her leveled up, but from what I've used her, like the speed that the air jab comes out, and having decent weapon selections like the ARX and the AK-74, Nomad's great, and I cannot wait to play more of her. So definitely an S class. So that's my thoughts on the Rainbow Six Extraction operators. I mean, I've played a good chunk of the game. I like to think I'm not entirely crazy about these rankings. If you disagree, feel free to tell me in the comments, and we'll hash it out. And if I'm wrong, I'll make a video with your explanations about how I was wrong. Because I really wish that I had a better reason to use Fuse or Dock, but they just seem kind of bad to me. I mean, Doc's got more useful abilities than Fuse does, but just, my goodness. So yeah, if I'm wrong, if I've ranked people lower than you think they are, or if you think that I think people were too good, like if you really don't believe that Finka is one of the best operators in the game, or Gridlock has ridiculous power, tell me. I'm always happy to talk to people on YouTube. And I'll be streaming a bit more of this tomorrow, and my friends have access to the Buddy Pass, so hopefully I'll catch you then. Thanks for watching.